Right to Life Week premiere event hosted by Campus Conservatives. For those of you that don't know, Jesus College Campus Conservatives is a group that helps promote and helps discuss conservative ideas on this campus. We're going to be holding a meeting next Tuesday night at 9 o'clock in HSU Room C. Anybody that wants to come, you're welcome to. At this time, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Kiessling. She's a great pro-life speaker. She's supported by groups like Feminists for Life and other things like that, so we would like to welcome her. Give me a round of applause.
Thank you. Well, I'm very glad to be here. I was adopted nearly from birth, and like many adoptees, for years I dreamed of being able to meet my birth mother. My search began on my 18th birthday, and I was shocked when told on that day that that door was closed, that I would never have the opportunity to meet her, and it was very, very difficult for me. All these years I just had this expectation. The family that I grew up in looked nothing alike. My mom's 5 feet, my dad's 5'7", my brother's 6'6", and people would just look at us and say, "Were you adopted?" And I felt like it was this big thing, and I was so different from everybody else. Also, that family was Jewish. My family would talk about the relatives who were killed in the Holocaust, and I had tremendous empathy for them, but I never felt like those were my people. In 2nd grade, I remember seeing the mini-series on TV, Alex Haley's Roots, in which he went back several generations to find his roots. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to find who my people were. And I felt that that would help give me a sense of value, identity, and purpose. Also, that brother who was 6'6", he was a year and a half older than me, he used to beat me up all the time. I used to cry to my parents, "Why didn't you adopt me first?" Because I thought that if I was older than him, I could then beat him up. They had told me that I was adopted when I was so young that I really didn't understand it. I didn't relate that I had actually been in mother's womb, but pregnant women were always very special women to me because that was really different. Then my parents took me to see the musical Annie, Little Orphan Annie, and I began to romanticize about this birth family that I had out there. My brother, who used to beat me up, went on to get into quite a bit of trouble. The first time the police knocked on the door, he was in 3rd grade. He's been in and out of jail and prison from the age of 16. He's in prison again right now and will finally be released in another week. Growing up, my parents couldn't understand this, how they could have a daughter who's heading off to law school someday and a son that's in all this trouble. My dad picked up this book, On the Criminal Mind, and there's a lot of other books out there like it that explain that socially deviant behavior is genetic. We all felt quite comfortable with that explanation, so my parents didn't have to look at all the poor choices that they made with their very liberal parenting style. My dad said it was sort of this Dr. Spock philosophy. Laissez-faire, hands off, let them be, and they'll turn out okay. And that backfired because my brother had his hands on a whole lot of trouble. But I was very pleased with his explanation as well. So then when I would go to school, people would ask me, "Eric Wasser, isn't that your brother?" I'd be able to say, "Yeah, but we were both adopted. So, we're not really related." And that became my genetic disclaimer. And that applied to my adopted mother as well. My mom, who raised me, is bipolar. That's manic depressive highs and lows and mood swings. She was finally diagnosed over 9 years ago, got on some medication for it, and today we have some degree of peaceful relations. But growing up, nobody wanted to come over my house. And as a teenager trying to sort through all this and make sense of it all, I just figured, I must come from something better. And again, if I could just meet my birth family, then I could then know where I came from. Well, at 18, I petitioned for my non-identifying information. And when it arrived, it had everything you can imagine about my birth mother except for her name. It had her eye color, hair color, height, weight, age, the age of my half-brother and half-sister, who were 11 and 13 when I was born, her ethnicity, religious background, occupation, educational level, detailed medical history. And I just hung on to every word. But then for my father, it said that he was Caucasian and of large build, and that was it. And I thought, that sounds like a police description. I mean, come on, she couldn't even say his eye color, hair color, nothing. And I thought it over for about a week, and what could the possible explanation be? And then I called my caseworker and I asked her, was my mom raped? And she said, yeah, I didn't want to tell you. And I was just devastated. I remember feeling so ugly and so unwanted and thinking, who would ever love me? Who's ever going to want to marry me and have a family with me? Because after all, socially deviant behavior is genetic, right? And that's what we had believed, and now all of a sudden, part of my genes include that I'm a serial rapist. And I had to reconcile this with my own life. What does that mean about who I am? Do I have this ugliness lurking inside of me? If I would give birth to a son someday, would he become a rapist? And I really believed that a nice guy would want to get involved with someone like me. I had already experienced discrimination dating with several different guys, going to meet their family or friends, being told, you know, just don't mention that adoption thing, okay? As if that was something that I should be ashamed of. As if it made me a second-class citizen. And I thought, now how am I going to deal with this? And then, of course, at the same time, I thought about the issue of abortion, because that's what you always hear about, right? Growing up, abortion wasn't talked about a whole lot in my family. When I was 12, my 16-year-old cousin had one, and I recall the discussions being that this was not a good thing. When I was 15, a year after my grandfather had died, it was like the floodgates had opened, and for years my grandma would share that when she was pregnant with my aunt, who's the younger of her two children, that my grandfather had told her to go get an abortion. She said, I never loved him again after that. How could they do that? How could they kill the babies? She'd say to me over and over again for years. And so I learned from her that, okay, so this is definitely a bad thing, but I just won't have one. Beyond that, it didn't affect my life, so I didn't give it much more thought. And in high school, we studied this issue, and I remember seeing photos of aborted babies and being horrified, but I didn't identify with that. I didn't think, oh, that could have been me. No, I thought it was just some sad story where she couldn't afford to keep me, but abortion didn't apply to my life. I thought. I turn 18, I get this information, and not only does it apply to my life, it has to do with my very existence. And it was as if I could hear the echoes of all of those people who would say, well, except in cases of rape, or, oh, especially in cases of rape. And now all those people were talking about me, about my life. And I felt like I had at least half the world against me. That there's all these people out there who don't even know me, who are standing in judgment of my life, so quick to dismiss it just because of how I was conceived. And I felt like I was now going to have to justify my own existence. That I would have to prove myself to the world that I shouldn't have been aborted and that I was worthy of living. And after a while, I had it all worked out in my head that if I could just meet this certain societal standard that's out there that dictates what one's value is, if I could just make myself attractive and successful, and if I could just find that relationship where someone would love me, then I'd have value and I could feel good about myself. And I figured that then people could look at me and say, oh, well, look at Rebecca, this nice, young, attractive, intelligent woman. Clearly, Rebecca shouldn't have been aborted. And then everyone would see the light, and single-handedly, I could bring an end to abortion in this world. And as you can imagine, that kind of attitude ended up getting me into a lot of trouble. But isn't that message so prevalent in our society that your value is based upon perhaps how you were conceived, who your parents are, what you look like, how smart you are, how athletic, what college you attend, what you do with your life, what kind of house you live in, how much money you make. Motivational speakers go around telling people that if you could just make something of yourself, then you too could be somebody. You know, not everybody has those opportunities or capabilities, and people mess up in life. And so what then? They're not